Good morning and welcome to the library. Today we're going to talk about copyright and what it means for you and the things you find on the internet and how you will use them in the classroom and within research. Basically, what does it mean for you as an 8th grader? Copying someone else's written work and then passing it off as your own, you already know that that's called plagiarism. But something that we don't always think about is, what if you want to use a picture and add that to your presentation or to a slide? If it's just one picture and you found it on Google, is it okay? Is it wrong? Turns out the answer is yes. It absolutely does violate copyright, and there are certain ways that you can use images and text and ideas that you find online, but you have to make sure you give credit where the credit is due. One of the main reasons that there are copyright laws is to protect intellectual property. The dictionary defines those two words as intellect, the capacity of knowledge; property, it shows ownership. So essentially, intellectual property is going to be the ownership of one's knowledge and ideas. Anytime you create something, whether it is a painting, a drawing, a song, something you do by hand, something that is digital, anything like that, if it comes from your brain, whether it's fact or something creative, it's your intellectual property. How would you feel if someone else tried to take credit for something that you worked hard on to create? Not so great, right? So some questions that we have to ask ourselves whenever we are trying to use other people's works in research or presentations are: how would you want others to use or share your work? When you consider that, it wouldn't feel very good to have something stolen and someone else pretend that they created it themselves. And the other question is, when is it okay to reuse or share someone else's work? This presentation is going to go through some of the guidelines and rules and laws that exist to protect you and to make sure that credit is given appropriately. One of the things that allows us to use copyrighted works is called fair use. It's an important exception to copyright rules because it allows teachers and students to use a small percentage of a piece of work for teaching or learning purposes. Even though that's the case, that doesn't mean that everything is fair game. There are four rules that you need to take note of regarding what is considered a full fair use. The first rule is that the work needs to be for an educational, non-profit purpose. The work cannot be used for any monetary gain or business endeavor, and you cannot recreate or redistribute the material used in order to profit. So let's say that I wanted to make a DVD of an old VHS movie that I had. Let's say it was The Lion King. I have it on VHS, but I don't have it on DVD. Disney has it locked up in the vault for some reason, and they won't let anyone have it. So if I think, I'm just going to make a quick buck, record the VHS onto a DVD, and then start to sell those, that violates fair use for a lot of different reasons. First of all, it's not really for an educational or nonprofit purpose. I'm trying to make money. I'm not trying to teach anybody anything except for maybe capitalism. So it violates the education, it violates the profit. So you definitely cannot do something like that, whether it was a video or a picture or something like that. You can't resell someone else's idea. Rule number 2 is that the work needs to be justified educationally, or how are you using it to support your learning? This is especially important with video and audio clips. It's important for teachers and students to determine if there's a direct connection to the learning and to the content of what is being taught. Basically, the keyword here is going to be connections. How does watching Selena in Spanish class really relate to the educational goals and the learning objectives in class? You can say that there's a little bit of a connection there, but the entire movie is kind of stretching it a little bit. Taking that same example, only a small percentage of a given work is to be used. The less material you use, the least likely to infringe on copyright law. Essentially, if the use includes a large portion of the copyrighted work, fair use is less likely to be found. That same example of watching Selena. If you are watching the entire movie in class, how is that really adding to the educational value and the learning objectives? If you're pulling out certain pieces and clips of that movie, generally 3 minutes or less, that relate directly to learning objectives, then that is something that is okay and appropriate under fair use. It's going to relate to students, so to you guys, in the way of if you were wanting to include a clip in a movie or from a YouTube video or something like that to support your idea or to show something that you've researched, the more of it you use, the less likely it is to be fair use. Teachers always want to see what you know and what you are learning. Using other things to support your ideas is great. Relying on them entirely doesn't really show what you can do. And the same goes with written works whenever you're citing from a source. If you're using a ton of quotations from a source, you're probably not using the ideas and someone else's intellectual property appropriately. Another question to consider is, does your need affect the potential sales of the original work? So if you include this material, does it take away any opportunities from the original creator? Going back to that idea of, if I just copy something from VHS to a DVD, or if I copy a video from YouTube on my phone and then repost it on my own page, how is that going to affect the original author? Another thing to think of is, are you portraying the work in a negative way or in some way that would affect public perception? Just because you don't like something doesn't mean you get to completely mock it and use all of those things, all of the material that's already there to sway the public. So that all talks about really generally new things, new works that you're going to see online. When you're researching, especially in a history class or sometimes an English class, you're going to come across primary sources. So a question that you might have is, what if the work I'm researching is really old, like really, really old, or it doesn't have a single author, like it's a historical document, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, something like that. In this case, these works are considered public domain, which means they don't fall under copyright law. And they are available to the public to use. For most things, copyright expires after a certain amount of time, and that is when things will come into the public domain. So how does that matter to you? What's the point? You're wanting to know whether or not you can use websites, documents, pictures, and things like that you find online. How can you make sure that what you're using is copyright free? If you're looking for images, places to look could be Creative Commons, Flickr CC, Pixabay, Unsplash, and Stock Snap are a few examples of places to find copyright-free images. Again, even though these are public domain, some of them do have requirements as to how they can be shared, so definitely check those out before you use them. Even though they're public domain, you still need to give credit for the author's work. Some images won't allow you to alter them or change them, even if they allow you to share them copyright-free. If you've noticed throughout this presentation, every image that has been included has a link underneath it, has some text that tells you who created the image and where it was found. That's a basic citation that can be used regardless of if something is copyrighted or copyright-free. Okay, but what if you really, really, really want to use something that's copyright protected? You can certainly pursue that. It might take more time, but if you can figure out who the owner of the work is, you can contact them to request permission in writing. That's the only way to get permission to use copyrighted works outside of the rules surrounding fair use. If you're wanting to make that argument to use their work, be sure to include the valid reasons that you're wanting to use it to support them maybe giving you permission for that. Sometimes a fee will be included. A lot of times if your music teacher is using song lyrics or a melody that is copyrighted by a popular band, they normally have to pay a price to do that because it is a copyrighted work. Most of the time, if you are doing a choir concert and you're singing that song, you're not really charging people to come in and see that unless it's for going towards some nonprofit organization. So that's just something interesting to see of how copyright can be used, and you see it every day in school. So why does it all matter? First of all, there are legal consequences. You could pay a fine or face jail time for violating copyright, and also it's just a bad mark on your reputation. Another reason is because it is a way to ensure fair digital spaces. Everyone is creating things, and they want to make sure that those things are used properly, and that if the creator puts it out there, they want to get credit for it. Also, ethically and morally, it's just the right thing to do. Passing something off as yours that you didn't create, let's call a spade, it's lying. Another reason this all matters is because it's a way to protect content and creativity for everyone. Again, creators are putting stuff out there, they want their name on it, they want the credit for that. And how it all matters directly right now, if you're caught violating copyright or you're caught plagiarizing, it's going to result in a failing grade, and nobody wants that. So consider these things the next time that you want to just copy and paste something. Limit the use of a work to only what you need to make your point. If someone has a really good point and you want to quote them, take only the part that is necessary. Add value to a work by transforming it into something new. Don't just repeat what someone else said. Use images that you're sure are copyright free. You can refer back to this presentation or the handout to see places you can get that information. Be sure to check on the level you're allowed to use the work. That will be found on those Creative Commons websites that can give you that information there as well. With written work, make sure that you credit the original author with a citation, even if you've restated it and paraphrased it in your own words. Intellectual property. Still not your idea solely, it came from someone else. Give that person credit. So you can see here that I didn't just come up with all of this on my own. I have my works cited here, my citations. I used information from Kathy Schrock's Guide to Everything, definitions from the United States Copyright Office, and definitions and information from the U.S. Copyright Office Fair Use Index. So if you want to find out more information about these topics, you can go and you can look here. Also, again, make sure to use some of the resources that we talked about.